Welcome back to another dark chapter from the Wasteland. I'm glad you're here. Today we're talking about the Master from the original Fallout, the grotesque villain everyone remembers as just another monster to defeat. But there's a secret buried in the lore that most players never discovered. A tragedy so profound it reveals the Master wasn't just evil. He was something far more disturbing. He was a good man who became a monster while still believing he was saving everyone. Most people remember fighting the Master or seeing his horrifying appearance, that mass of flesh fused with machinery. But few know the truth about his identity. Before the transformation, or the fatal flaw in his master plan that made his entire vision impossible from the very beginning. This is a story about Richard Grey, about 60 years of wasted effort, about the one biological fact that destroyed a god, and about why the Master's real tragedy is far darker than anything you saw on screen. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I need to tell you something before it gets buried with the rest of the Wasteland's secrets. They call him the Master now, the Dark God, the Holy Flame. But I knew him once, in a different time, when he still had a name that mattered. Richard Grey. Just a man, just a doctor. That was before the transformation, before the cathedral, before the unity twisted everything he was into something that should never have existed. You want to know the real horror of what happened in Southern California. It's not the super mutants tearing through settlements. It's not the cathedral cult preaching salvation through mutation. The real horror is that the monster who built all of this, the creature responsible for dragging thousands into FEV vats and turning them into hulking green soldiers, started out trying to save people. Let me take you back. 2092. Vault City opens its doors for the first time. Richard Moreau walks out into the wasteland, exiled for murder. The circumstances, they say, are unknown. Maybe they are. Maybe that part of him was already broken. But he changes his name to Grey, travels south to the hub, and becomes a doctor, a brilliant one. People loved him, called him a philosopher. His friend Harold, a caravan master, thought the world of the man. Grey had this way of seeing problems and wanting to fix them. The caravans were being attacked. Mutants, gangers, raiders, but mostly mutants. Strange creatures coming from somewhere in the northwest, killing guards, dragging people away. Grey couldn't stand it. So in 2102, he convinces Harold to lead an expedition. They're going to find the source, stop the attacks, save the trade routes. Noble, right? Heroic even. June 23rd, 2102. They find Mariposa military base. What they don't know is that inside those walls are vats. Vats full of something called FEV, forced evolutionary virus, pre-war military research designed to make super soldiers. The base is crawling with mutants and security robots. Grey's team fights their way in. Most of them die in the corridors. Only Grey and Harold make it to the vats. That's when it happens. A robotic arm, just a crane doing its programmed routine. It crashes into them. Harold gets knocked unconscious, and Richard Grey falls into a vat of FEV. Now here's where you need to understand something. FEV doesn't just change you, it rebuilds you. Grey floated in that green slime for days, nearly drowning, his body breaking down and reforming in ways that shouldn't be possible. His skin peeled and festered. The pain was beyond anything you can imagine. He crawled out of that vat barely alive, barely conscious, pulling himself to the control room. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to lose your humanity one cell at a time? Grey kept an audio log. You can still find it in Mariposa if you know where to look. He describes the transformation, how the green substance merged with him, how tendrils grew from his stomach, how his mind expanded even as his body became something unrecognizable. But here's the secret that most people miss. The man who fell into that vat, who spent months mutating and absorbing other creatures, who eventually fused himself with a computer. In the Los Angeles vault, Creating that grotesque mass of flesh and machine never stopped being Richard Gray the Doctor. Never stopped wanting to save humanity. That's the tragedy they don't tell you about. The Master didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a villain. He genuinely believed he was creating salvation. After he developed the Neuralink, connected his expanding consciousness to the military computers, he learned everything about the FEV. He started experimenting, dipping humans into the vats, creating super mutants. Most of them came out big and dumb, brutish soldiers with diminished intelligence. But Gray noticed something. The humans with less radiation damage, the ones from vaults or protected areas, they converted better. They retained more of their minds. They became stronger, more resistant to radiation and disease. In his twisted logic, this was the answer. Create a master race of mutants who could thrive in the wasteland. A unity where everyone was the same, where the differences that caused the nuclear war could never tear humanity apart again. He called it unity. One race, one goal, one people moving forward to their destiny. The Master established the children of the cathedral as a front, human followers who worshipped him as the holy flame, the dark god, the night god. They preached about salvation and rebirth. They lured people in. Meanwhile, beneath the cathedral, the Master's super mutant army grew. They raided settlements. They dragged screaming people to the vats, all in service of the unity. By the time someone figured out what was really happening, the Master had been at this for decades. He'd perfected his dipping process in January 2103. He'd created an army. He had followers, human and mutant alike, who believed in his vision. He was intelligent, persuasive, powerful beyond measure. His consciousness spread across multiple voices, masculine and feminine, calm and enraged, human and mechanical, all speaking at once in that horrifying polyphonic chorus. And here's what keeps me up at night. If you talk to him, really talk to him, he'd tell you about his plan with complete sincerity. He'd explain how mutants were better equipped to deal with the wasteland, how normal humans had brought nuclear death to everyone, how this would be the age of mutants, how he'd transform those who were required for unity, allow the rest to live out their days under mutant control, but none would breed because they'd be the last of their race. It sounds insane when you hear it laid out like that, but the Master believed every word. To him, he wasn't a monster. He was a savior. He was Richard Gray, the Doctor, still trying to cure the wasteland's sickness. He'd just become the disease in the process. The Brotherhood of Steel started investigating. They recovered super mutant corpses. Their head scribe, a brilliant woman named Vri, performed complete autopsies. She measured them. 3.2 meters tall, over 360 kilograms of mass. Muscle composition of over 77%. Perfect DNA strands with all recessive genes for ailments eradicated. Enhanced neural transmitters and synaptic receivers. These creatures were biological marvels. But Vri found something else, something the Master had never bothered to check in all his years of experimentation and planning, something that would unravel everything. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to know if I'm the only one who feels this way about what the Master truly was. The Vault Dweller eventually made it to the cathedral, made it down through the hidden passages, past the Nightkin guards, into the Los Angeles vault where the Master waited. And what happened in that confrontation? Well, that's where the Master's second darkest secret comes into play, the one that destroyed him more completely than any weapon could. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what Vri discovered first. You need to understand what the Brotherhood found in their research, because that information became the key to everything. The revelation that would bring down the unity without firing a single shot. The Master had built his entire plan on transformation, on turning humanity into something better, something that could survive and thrive in the wasteland, something that would never fight amongst themselves because they'd all be the same. He'd kidnapped thousands, dipped them in FEV, created his army, all for this vision of unity. He never asked the right question, never ran the right test, never checked whether his master race could actually do the one thing every successful species needs to do. Think about what that means. Think about what you'd build your entire worldview around, what atrocities you'd commit, what moral lines you'd cross, all in service of a goal that was fundamentally impossible from the very beginning. The Brotherhood's research was thorough. Vree didn't just examine one super mutant corpse. She studied multiple subjects, cross-referenced her findings, ran every test she could think of. And what she found was written plainly in her autopsy report, though the master never bothered to read between the lines of his own grand design. Super mutants were sterile, every single one of them. The FEV did incredible things to human biology. It rebuilt DNA into a quad helix structure instead of the normal double helix. It eliminated genetic diseases. It enhanced muscle growth, bone density, tissue regeneration. It made these creatures practically immune to radiation and disease. It extended their lifespans indefinitely through cellular regeneration. But in doing all of that, it destroyed their ability to reproduce. You see, human reproductive cells, gametes, they only contain half the normal chromosomes. 23 instead of 46. That's basic biology. When sperm meets egg, you get a complete set. But the FEV, in its programming, interpreted those half cells as damaged, as something broken that needed fixing. So it corrected them, restored the missing chromosomes, made them whole, which meant super mutant reproductive cells couldn't combine anymore. You can't create new life when both halves of the equation are already complete. The mechanism for meiosis, for proper cell division, it just doesn't work with quad helix DNA structure. Fertilization becomes impossible. Vree concluded in her report that all mutants were sterile, that the Brotherhood could potentially eliminate the mutant threat entirely by removing the sources of mutation, because no new mutants would be born naturally. They'd only exist as long as someone kept dipping humans in FEV. But here's the thing that makes this tragedy so much worse. The master never knew. In all his intelligence, all his planning, all his years of experimentation, he never checked whether his new race could breed. He assumed it. He built his entire ideology on the assumption that super mutants were the future of humanity, the next step in evolution, the master race that would inherit the wasteland. He never asked his mutants if they'd tried to reproduce, never ran the biological tests, never questioned whether his unity could sustain itself beyond the initial generation. He was so focused on transformation, on conversion, on bringing everyone into the fold, that he never considered what would happen after. What happens to a race that can't have children? What happens to unity when the last human has been dipped and there's no one left to create more mutants? The answer is extinction. Slow, inevitable extinction. The master's perfect race would thrive, for a while, living their extended lifespans, but eventually they'd die out. No children, no future, no destiny, just a gradual decline into nothing. And Richard Gray, the brilliant doctor turned grotesque god, had built his entire purpose around creating something that was doomed from the start. Now, the Vault Dweller. You've heard of them, probably. The person from Vault 13 who went out looking for a water chip and ended up saving the wasteland. They made it to the cathedral. They infiltrated the children, got the black badge from Morpheus, descended into the Los Angeles vault where the master waited. The corridor leading to the master's chamber did something to you. Psychic pressure. Your perception dropped. Your intelligence dropped. Messages in your head getting progressively worse. Eye damage. Mental strain. Unless you had a psychic nullifier or the mental block perk, you'd reach the master already wounded, already compromised. And then you'd see him. This massive amalgamation of flesh fused with a computer terminal. Tendrils and cables intertwining. Multiple faces visible in the mass. 4 voices speaking at once. 1 robotic, 2 male, 1 calm and 1 enraged, and 1 female. All of them, the master, all of them, Richard Gray, He had twin Gatling lasers, floating iBots, super mutant guards. He was, by any measure, an incredibly powerful foe. Fighting him meant death for most people. 10,000 experience points if you managed to kill him. But at what cost? The Vault Dweller had another option. If their intelligence was high enough, if they'd talked to Vree, if they'd obtained her autopsy report and actually read it, understood what it meant, they could tell the Master the truth. Picture this scene. The Vault Dweller stands before this creature, this self-proclaimed savior of humanity, and the Master demands to know, will you join the Unity or die here? Join. Die. Join. Die. The voices overlap, insistent, powerful, and the Vault Dweller says they need proof. They need the Master to prove that unity is the best course for humanity. The Master, his ego demanding validation, agrees to explain. He talks about the Master race, about how mutants can survive and thrive in the Wasteland, about how differences will tear humanity apart, so they need one race, one goal, one people. Then the Vault Dweller drops it. You've got a problem with your master plan. The Master asks what problem. He's confident. He's spent decades on this. What could some Vault Dweller possibly know that he doesn't? I happen to know that your mutants are sterile. Imagine that moment. Imagine being the Master. Imagine having your entire worldview, your entire purpose, your entire existence called into question with a single sentence. The Master's first response is denial. Preposterous. The FEV2 virus doesn't destroy reproductive organs. He's certain of this. He's studied the FEV for years. This Vault Dweller must be lying, but they have proof. Vree's autopsy report. Hard. Data from Brotherhood researchers. The Master can call it forgery, can call it deception, but doubt has entered his consciousness now. That terrible seed of uncertainty. The Vault Dweller pushes. Have you talked to any of your mutants about this? Have you asked them? How about a female mutant? Go ahead. Ask them if they can reproduce. And in that moment, the Master realizes the truth. His army of super mutants, his perfect race, his unity, they're all sterile. Every single one. The Master race cannot master anything because they can't. Even create the next generation. They're an evolutionary dead end. A beautiful, powerful, doomed dead end. The Master begins to break down. His voices start to fracture. He talks about the things he's done in the name of progress and healing. All of it was madness. He can see that now. Madness. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. This creature who had consumed other beings, who had absorbed minds into his own consciousness, who had transformed thousands of humans into mutants, who had built an army and a cult and a vision of the future, he can't cope. The Vault Dweller shows him that everything he did was in vain. Every person he dipped, every life he destroyed, every choice he made after climbing out of that vat, it was all for nothing. The Master tells the Vault Dweller to leave while they still have hope, to find safe ground, and then he does something that no one expected from a final boss. He doesn't fight to the death. He doesn't rage against the dying of the light. He doesn't try to take the Vault Dweller down with him. He commits suicide. The Master initiates the self-destruct sequence for the nuclear device beneath the cathedral. 4 minutes. That's all the time the Vault Dweller has to escape. 4 minutes before the Master, the cathedral, the children, everything related to the Unity, gets vaporized in atomic fire. Why would he do that? Why would this powerful being, this near-immortal consciousness fused with machine and flesh, choose to end himself? Because Richard Gray was still in there. The doctor who wanted to save people. The man who saw the wasteland's suffering and tried to cure it. When he realized he'd become the disease instead of the cure, when he understood that his unity was built on a fundamental impossibility, he couldn't continue. The guilt, the horror of what he'd done, the futility of it all. It was too much. Some people think the Master was purely evil, a villain who needed to be stopped. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is more complicated, more tragic. The Master was a good man who became a monster while still believing he was good. He never lost his desire to save humanity. He just lost his ability to see that he was destroying it instead. Richard Gray fell into a vat of FEV trying to protect caravans. He crawled out as something inhuman. He spent years building the Unity, genuinely believing it was the answer. And when someone finally showed him the flaw in his perfect plan, he chose to end everything rather than continue the madness. That's the secret that gets buried. Not just that the Master's mutants were sterile, but that the Master himself was. A tragedy, a cautionary tale about good intentions twisted by circumstance and mutation and isolation and time, about how the road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions. Sometimes it's built with them, dipped in FEV, and given 4 voices that all believe they're doing the right thing. The Brotherhood of Steel knew about the sterility. Viri's report made it clear, but most people in the Wasteland never learned the details. They just knew that the Vault Dweller stopped the Master somehow, stopped the super mutant threat, saved everyone. They don't know about the conversation, about the revelation, about the Master's breakdown and his choice to self-destruct. The Vault Dweller's own memoirs are vague on the specifics. They say they can't remember exactly how they killed the Master. Maybe they don't want to remember. Maybe the psychic pressure in that corridor scrambled the memories. Or maybe it's just too painful to think about. Because if you really understand what happened, you have to grapple with some uncomfortable questions. Was killing the Master murder or mercy? Was he a victim of circumstance or the architect of his own damnation? Could he have been saved? Or was he too far gone the moment he fell into that vat? And here's the part that should terrify you. The Master wasn't stupid. He was brilliant. One of the most intelligent beings in the Wasteland. He had access to pre-war military data, scientific knowledge, years of experimental results, and he still missed the sterility issue. Still built his entire plan on a flawed foundation. What does that say about the rest of us? About our own plans and assumptions? About the things we believe without questioning? How many other grand schemes in the Wasteland are built on false premises, on unchecked assumptions, on hopes that reality won't support? The Master's darkest secret isn't just that his mutants couldn't breed. It's that he was human enough to care when he found out, human enough to feel guilt, human enough to choose death over continuing a futile campaign. The monster still had enough of Richard Gray inside him to recognize what he'd become and to end it. That fusion of flesh and machine, speaking in 4 voices, commanding an army of super mutants, worshipped as a god by the children of the cathedral. It all came down to one simple biological fact that destroyed everything: sterility, the inability to create new life, the fundamental flaw that made unity impossible. You want to know what really haunts me about this whole thing? It's not the body count. It's not even the horror of what the Master became. It's the timeline, the sheer scope of time where everything could have been different. Richard Gray fell into that FEV vat in June 2102. The Vault Dweller confronted the Master in March 2162, 60 years. 60 years of the Master building his unity, creating his army, perfecting his process, spreading his influence across Southern California. 60 years where nobody checked the one thing that mattered. Think about what happened in those decades. Gray spent the first months just surviving. The audio logs describe his agony. The initial transformation nearly killed him. He faded in and out of consciousness for days, sometimes weeks. When he finally stabilized enough to think clearly, he started experimenting on animals, exposing them to FEV, watching what happened, taking notes in his deteriorating mind. November 2102. The first human victim wanders into Mariposa. Gray consumes him. And that's when things change. When you absorb another consciousness, another mind, you don't just gain mass, you gain perspective, thoughts, memories. The Master started as Richard Gray, but he became something more as he absorbed others. Each person he consumed added to his complexity, his power, his madness. By January 2103, he'd perfected the dipping process. He knew how to transform humans into super mutants more reliably. He understood that less radiated subjects produced better results. Vault dwellers, people from protected settlements. Their cleaner DNA meant stronger, smarter mutants. That's when the kidnappings really started. When the Master's army began to grow in earnest. But here's what gets me. At any point during those 60 years, someone could have noticed. The super mutants themselves never questioned it. Did they even realize they couldn't reproduce? Did they care? Most of the mutants came out with diminished intelligence. The smart ones, the first-generation mutants made from clean subjects, they were rare. And even they were so focused on the unity, on the Master's vision, that maybe they never thought about having children, or maybe they did think about it and just accepted it as the cost of transcendence. You're stronger now, immune to radiation, nearly immortal through cellular regeneration. You don't get sick. You don't age the same way. Is reproduction really what matters? The Master told them they were the future. They believed him. Who questions? The god that gave you power. The lieutenant, the Master's right hand, he was one of the smart ones. He commanded the super mutants at Mariposa military base. He could speak eloquently about the unity, about transformation, about the virus itself. He knew the technical details. He understood that the FEV had been mutated by radiation after the war, that Wasteland humans had been exposed to this mutant FEV, inoculating them from the full effects. That's why the Master needed vault dwellers, clean subjects for optimal conversion. But even the lieutenant never mentioned reproduction. Never. Talked about the next generation. It's like the entire super mutant population had this collective blind spot. Or maybe it wasn't a blind spot at all. Maybe it was intentional ignorance. Because if you think too hard about being sterile, you have to confront what that means. You have to face the fact that your race is temporary, that unity has an expiration date. The Master absorbed so many minds, humans who wandered into Mariposa, test subjects who failed the transformation. Each consciousness became part of his larger whole. With all those perspectives, all those thoughts, all that accumulated. Knowledge, how did he never realize? Was it arrogance? Was it willful blindness? Or was there something about the FEV mutation itself that prevented him from seeing the flaw? I've wondered about that. Whether the virus did something to his cognition. Not in an obvious way. The Master was clearly intelligent, brilliant even. He could plan, strategize, manipulate. He created the Children of the Cathedral as a front organization. He used human cultists to lure in converts. He understood psychology, religion, social control. None of that requires diminished intelligence. But maybe the FEV created a blind spot around reproduction specifically. Maybe when it rewrote DNA into that quad helix structure, when it altered cells so fundamentally, it also altered the drive to reproduce, the instinct, the concern, made it irrelevant somehow. So the Master never thought to check because on some deep level, he didn't care. Procreation wasn't part of his worldview anymore. That would explain why none of the smart mutants ever brought it up. Why the lieutenant never questioned it. Why 60 years passed without anyone in the Unity realizing their entire plan was doomed. The FEV didn't just change their bodies, it changed what they valued, what they noticed, what they considered important. But then Vri examined the corpses. Vri, who was human, who had normal human DNA and normal human instincts, and she immediately identified the sterility as the most critical finding. Chief among the side effects, she wrote. The test subject would have been unable to reproduce with any creature, whether clean or mutated. To her, it was obvious. Essential information. The kind of thing you'd mention first when describing a new species. But to the Master and his mutants, it was invisible, a non-issue, not worth considering, until the Vault Dweller made it visible, made it matter, forced the Master to confront what he'd been ignoring for 6 decades. The Master's physical form was grotesque beyond description. Imagine a mass of flesh that used to be a man, now merged with other bodies, other creatures, tendrils extending out, cables intertwining with organic matter, faces visible in the amalgamation, all of it fused to a computer terminal. The overseer's chair from the Los Angeles Vault, designed to control the vault systems, now hosting an intelligence that spanned biological and mechanical substrates. People who saw him described having nightmares afterward. That image of flesh and machine, that violation of natural boundaries, it stuck with you. The children of the cathedral called him the Holy Flame, but they never actually saw him. Only the highest-ranking members got that privilege. The rest worshipped in ignorance, believing their God was something beautiful, something transcendent. Thighs. Reality was horror. The Master spoke in those four voices simultaneously. You'd hear the robotic tone giving orders, while the calm male voice explained philosophy, while the angry male voice threatened violence, while the female voice pleaded or seduced. All happening at once, all coming from the same source. It was designed to overwhelm, to break down your sense of individual identity, because that's what unity meant. No more individuals, no more separation, everyone together in one purpose. But it wasn't voluntary unity, it was forced. The Master's army raided settlements, they dragged people to the vats, screaming victims, dipped in FEV against their will. Most came out as brutish soldiers who could barely speak. The lucky ones retained their minds, but lost their humanity in other ways. Their appearance, their instincts, their place in human society. Marcus, one of the intelligent first-generation mutants, he survived long after the Master's death, went on to found Broken Hills with a Brotherhood paladin named Jacob. Tried to build a place where humans, ghouls, and mutants could live together. He mostly succeeded. But when people asked him about the Master in later years, Marcus didn't want to talk about it, treated it as dark history, something shameful that was better left buried. Lily Bowen, a Nightkin from the Master's army, she called the Master a bad man when people asked, said there was nothing good to know about him. But other Nightkin, they missed those days, missed having the Master's voice in their heads, missed the certainty of unity. Even knowing how it ended, even understanding the flaw in the plan, some of them wished they could go back. That's the insidious part. The Master's vision wasn't entirely wrong. Unity would have ended a lot of conflicts. If everyone was the same, if differences were eliminated, you'd remove many sources of violence. No more racism because there'd be only one race. No more war over resources because super mutants could survive on less. No more fear of radiation because they were immune. The problem wasn't the goal. The problem was the method and the fatal assumption. You can't build a sustainable future on forced transformation and reproductive impossibility. You can't create unity by destroying diversity. And you can't save humanity by eliminating what makes it human. But the Master couldn't see that, or he could see it and believe the trade-off was worth it. Those he transformed would live for centuries, nearly immortal through FEV-enhanced cellular regeneration, strong enough to survive anything the Wasteland threw at them. In his mind, that was salvation. So what if they couldn't have children? They wouldn't need children. They'd last forever, except nothing lasts forever. Immortal doesn't mean invincible. Super mutants could still die from injury, from combat, from accidents. Over long enough timelines, even with extended lifespans, the population would decline. Attrition would take its toll. And with no new mutants being born, every death would be permanent loss. The Master's unity had a countdown timer from the moment it began. He just never bothered to check how much time was on the clock. When the Brotherhood of Steel started investigating the super mutant threat, they approached it scientifically. They recovered corpses from night patrols. They brought them back to Lost Hills. They let Vree do her work. And Vree, brilliant and thorough, she didn't just look at the obvious things like size and strength. She examined the cellular level. the DNA structure, the reproductive system. Her conclusion was devastating in its simplicity. These creatures are sterile. If we eliminate the sources of mutation, the threat will eventually die out on its own. No need for genocide. No need for Totalwahr. Just contain the FEV, stop the master from creating more, and time will solve the problem. That's why the Brotherhood was willing to help the Vault Dweller, not just because the super mutants were dangerous, but because they understood the strategic. Reality, cut off the source and the whole unity collapses. It's unsustainable. It was always unsustainable, but the master didn't know. Kept dipping humans, kept building his army, kept preaching about the glorious future of the mutant race, right up until that moment in the Los Angeles vault when everything came crashing down. I think about the lieutenant sometimes. What happened to him when the master died? Did he understand why his god self-destructed? Did someone explain about the sterility? Or did he just know that the cathedral exploded and the master was gone and suddenly Unity had no leader, no direction, no purpose? The super mutant army splintered after that. Some followed various generals and officers. Some tried to continue the master's work. Attis, a super mutant general, he actually went looking for a cure for sterility. Broke into Vault-Tech's corporate vault, searching for research that could let super mutants breed. He failed. The cure didn't exist. And even if it had, what then? You'd just be creating a race of super mutants who could reproduce, who could genuinely replace humanity instead of just threatening to. Maybe that's why no cure existed. Maybe somewhere in the pre-war research, they'd identified the sterility issue and decided it was a feature, not a bug, a safety measure. Create your super soldiers, but make sure they can't breed and overthrow you. Make sure they need you to keep making more. Maintain control through biological dependence. If that's true, then the master fell victim to a trap built before the war even started. Richard Gray, trying to save the Wasteland, stumbled into a pre-war failsafe and never realized it. Built his entire ideology around overcoming human weakness, only to be undone by human cleverness from 2 centuries earlier. The real question isn't whether the master's plan was flawed. We've established that. The real question is what he could have done differently. If someone had told Richard Gray about the sterility issue back in 2103, right after he perfected the dipping process, would it have changed anything? Would he have abandoned Unity? Or would he have found a way to rationalize it, to incorporate it into his vision? I think he would have stopped. That's the tragedy I keep coming back to. The master who broke down when the Vault Dweller revealed the truth. That was Richard Gray finally seeing clearly. The guilt he expressed, the madness he acknowledged, the self-destruction he chose. Those weren't the actions of a purely evil being. Those were the actions of someone who realized they'd committed atrocities for nothing. If he'd known earlier, before he'd dipped thousands of humans, before he'd built the cathedral, before he'd created the children and the lieutenant, and the whole infrastructure of Unity, he might have found another way. He was brilliant, creative. He had access to pre-war scientific knowledge. Maybe he could have worked on curing the sterility instead of ignoring it. Maybe he could have found a different path to saving humanity, but he didn't know. And by the time he found out, it was too late. The body count was too high, the atrocities were too severe. There was no coming back from what he'd done. So he chose to end it, end himself, end the cathedral, end Unity before it could spread any further. The nuclear device beneath the cathedral that was always there. The master had it installed as a failsafe. If Unity failed, if the plan collapsed, if something went catastrophically wrong, he could destroy everything, clean slate, no survivors to carry on a corrupted vision. It was the last rational decision of a man who knew he might lose control. And when the Vault Dweller showed him the truth, when he realized Unity wasn't salvation but damnation, he used it. 4 minutes. That's all the warning anyone got. The Vault Dweller ran, made it out, but everyone else in the cathedral died. The children who worshipped him, the super mutants who served him, The whole organization vaporized in atomic fire. Some people call that murder. I call it something else. The Master taking responsibility. He created unity. He built the cathedral. He made the super mutants. When he understood it was all wrong, he didn't leave the cleanup to others. He didn't try to escape and rebuild somewhere else. He ended it himself. Took everyone involved with him. That's more self-awareness than most wasteland leaders ever show. More accountability. The Master's final act wasn't conquering the world or going down fighting. It was accepting that he was wrong and making sure his mistake died with him. But here's what keeps me up at night. The Master's ideology didn't die. Not completely. Super mutants still exist in the wasteland. The ones he created before his death, they're still out there. Some of them still believe in unity. Some of them still think the Master was right, that only the execution was flawed. They look at their strength, their immunity to radiation, their extended lifespans, and they think, this is better. This is what humanity should become. Marcus founded Broken Hills, like I mentioned, tried to prove that mutants could integrate with humans and ghouls, build something together, but even that eventually fell apart. By the time of New Vegas, Broken Hills was abandoned. The dream of peaceful coexistence didn't last. Too many humans couldn't look at super mutants without seeing monsters. Too many super mutants couldn't look at humans without seeing weakness. And the Nightkin, the Master's stealth troops, they went even more wrong. The stealth boys they used caused mental deterioration, schizophrenia, violent psychosis. Tabitha, up on Black Mountain, broadcasting her delusions across the Mojave. Davison and his Nightkin attacking the Bright Brotherhood. Dog and God, two personalities trapped in one mutant body, fighting for control. The Master's elite forces became some of the most damaged beings in the wasteland. Did the Master know that would happen? Did he understand the long-term effects of stealth boy exposure? Or was that another thing he didn't check? Another consequence he didn't consider? How many other time bombs did he leave scattered across Southern California, waiting to go off decades after his death? The Vault Dweller saved the wasteland from unity. Everyone acknowledges that, but they also doomed Vault 13 in the process. The Overseer exiled them, said they'd been changed by the outside world, said they couldn't come home because they'd contaminate the Vault's isolation. The person who saved everyone got kicked out as a reward. There's a parallel there. The Vault Dweller became a hero by stopping a man who thought he was saving everyone. Both of them were trying to do good. Both of them made sacrifices. The difference was that the Vault Dweller's sacrifice was forced on them, while the Master chose his. But they were both ultimately alone, cut off from what they were trying to protect. I wonder if the Vault Dweller understood the Master better than anyone else. If standing there in that Los Angeles vault, listening to those four voices break down into despair, they saw something of themselves. Someone who left safety to help others. Someone who got changed by the wasteland. Someone who could never go back to what they were before. Maybe that's why the Vault Dweller's memoirs are vague about killing the Master. Maybe they didn't kill him at all. Maybe they just showed him the truth and let him make his own choice. And maybe that felt too much like mercy, too much like understanding, for something the wasteland demanded be portrayed as pure evil. The children of the cathedral, most of them were victims. They believed in the holy flame. They thought they were part of something meaningful. When Morpheus, one of the high priests, tried to help people, he genuinely believed he was doing good work. The fact that it was all a front for forced mutation, that the salvation they promised was actually body horror and loss of identity, most of the children didn't know that part. When the cathedral exploded, it killed believers along with conspirators, killed people who'd been lied to along with people who did the lying. The Master didn't discriminate in his final act. Everyone associated with Unity died. Clean break. No loose ends. No chance for someone to try to rebuild his vision. Was that the right choice? I don't know. Part of me thinks he could have just killed himself. Let the cathedral stand. Let the children leave and find new lives. But maybe he understood something about ideologies, about how they persist even after their founders die, about how people will cling to comforting lies rather than face hard truths. By destroying everything, he made sure unity couldn't evolve into something else, couldn't get sanitized and repackaged, couldn't become a legend that future generations might try to recreate. He killed the dream along with the dreamer. The Enclave tried something similar later, modified FEV to kill anything with mutated DNA. If they'd succeeded, they would have wiped out most of the wasteland. But at least they knew their plan would work. At least they'd checked the biology. The Master couldn't even claim that much. His plan was doomed from conception, and he never noticed until someone rubbed his face in it. There's a holodisc you can find in Mariposa, Richard Gray's audio diary. He recorded his transformation, his pain, his confusion, his slow realization that he was becoming something new. If you listen to it, you hear a man losing his humanity and trying to understand what's happening to him. There's fear in those recordings, genuine fear. That fear never went away. The Master kept it, buried under layers of absorbed consciousness and mechanical augmentation and 6 decades of conviction. But it was still there, waiting. And when the truth about sterility came out, that fear surged back. The fear that he'd become a monster for nothing. That all the pain, all the transformation, all the loss of self, it was meaningless. That's what broke him. Not the Vault Dwellers' weapons, not the Brotherhood's opposition. Just the simple biological fact that his master race couldn't procreate. That unity was a dead end. That Richard Gray had sacrificed his humanity to save a species that couldn't be saved his way. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The aftermath of the Master's death rippled across decades. Super mutants scattered. Some went east, eventually ending up in the capital Wasteland. Others stayed in California, trying to find places they could belong. The smart ones, the first-generation mutants, they had it worst. They were intelligent enough to understand what they'd lost, human enough to remember what they'd been, but mutant enough that humans feared them and they were sterile. That fact, the one that destroyed the Master, it affected them too. They couldn't build families, couldn't create communities that would last beyond a single generation. Everything they built was temporary, borrowed time until the last of them died off. Some of them accepted it. Marcus made peace with what he was, found purpose in other things, but others couldn't let go. Attis searching for a fertility cure. Other mutants trying to continue the Master's work. They weren't stupid. They weren't evil. They just couldn't accept that their existence was a biological dead end. Can you blame them? If you woke up tomorrow and someone told you that you and everyone like you were sterile, that your entire demographic was doomed to extinction, how would you react? Would you accept it gracefully? Or would you fight against it, search for solutions, refuse to believe it was permanent? The super mutants had it worse because they knew why they were sterile. It wasn't a disease they could cure. It was fundamental to what they were. The same FEV that made them strong made them barren. You couldn't have one without the other. 2. Become fertile again. They'd have to stop being super mutants. And what would be the point of that? So they lived with it. The ones who survived, they watched the decades pass. They saw the wasteland change. They outlived most of the humans who'd known them in their prime. And slowly, through violence and accident and time, their numbers dwindled. The Master's army became scattered refugees. The unity became a cautionary tale. But the Master himself, Richard Gray, the man who started it all, he never lived to see that slow decline. He ended it on his own terms, went out in nuclear fire, just like the world he'd been trying to fix. There's a symmetry there, a bitter, tragic symmetry. The Wasteland was destroyed by nuclear weapons in 2077. The Master was destroyed by nuclear weapons in 2162. Both times the bombs were supposed to solve a problem. Both times they created new ones. The only difference was that the master understood what he was doing, made a choice, took responsibility. That's more than the people who started the Great War ever did. They just pushed the buttons and died. The master pushed the button knowing exactly what it meant, knowing he deserved it, knowing it was the only way to end what he'd started. I've told you about Richard Gray, about the master, about the sterility and the suicide and the 60 years of wasted effort. But there's one more piece to this that matters, one more secret that explains why this story refuses to stay buried. The master was a victim. That's the part people don't want to hear. They want their villains simple. They want evil to be pure and uncomplicated. But Richard Gray fell into that by accident. He didn't choose to become the master. He didn't ask for the transformation. A robotic arm malfunctioned or followed its programming, and a man trying to protect caravans ended up floating in FEV for days, his body breaking down and reforming in ways that destroyed his humanity. What would you have done if you crawled out of that vat, covered in slime, in agony, barely able to think, slowly mutating into something unrecognizable? What would you have done? Given up? Let yourself die? Or would you have tried to find meaning in the horror? Tried to convince yourself that there was a purpose to the suffering? Gray chose purpose. He chose to believe that his transformation meant something, that he was becoming something better, something necessary. He experimented on animals first, then on himself, then on the humans who wandered into Mariposa. Each step seemed logical from where he was standing, each choice built on the previous one. By the time he'd absorbed enough minds to become the master, by the time he'd developed his Neuralink and accessed the military computers, he was too far gone to question the foundation. The path from doctor to monster wasn't a single decision. It was 1,000 small choices, each one seeming reasonable in context, each one taking him further from who he'd been. That's how it always works. Nobody wakes up and decides to become a villain. They make compromises, they rationalize, they tell themselves they're doing what's necessary, and by the time they realize how far they've fallen, the way back is gone. The CE master never had a way back. Even if he'd realized the sterility issue early, even if he'd stopped creating super mutants after the first dozen, he was still a mass of mutated flesh fused to a computer, still spoke in 4 voices, still had absorbed other consciousnesses into his own. There was no cure for what he'd become, no way to reverse the FEV, no path to being Richard Gray again. So he went forward, built unity, created an ideology around his transformation, made himself into a god, because that was easier than accepting he was a victim. And for 60 years, it worked. He had purpose. He had followers. He had a vision of the future that made his suffering meaningful, until the Vault Dweller took it away, showed him that his vision was built on false premises, that his suffering had been meaningless after all, that Richard Gray fell into a vat and became a monster and spent 6 decades creating more monsters, and none of it mattered because the master race couldn't reproduce. That's when he became human again, just for a moment, long enough to feel guilt, long enough to recognize madness, long enough to choose death over continuing the lie. The explosion that destroyed the cathedral, it registered on seismographs across Southern California. People felt it as an earthquake, saw the mushroom cloud rising over Los Angeles, and the next day, super mutant attacks dropped dramatically. The raids stopped, the kidnappings ended, the Unity fractured without its leader. The Vault Dweller saved the Wasteland, but they also revealed a truth that destroyed a person. The Master deserved to know about the sterility, deserved to understand that his plan was flawed. But knowledge has consequences. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it breaks you beyond repair. I think about Vri sometimes, about her conducting those autopsies, documenting the sterility, never realizing that her research would be weaponized. She thought she was helping the Brotherhood understand the enemy. She thought the information would be used for tactical planning. She never expected it to become the thing that convinced a god to commit suicide. Did she feel guilty afterward? Did she wonder if maybe some truths should stay hidden? Or did she sleep soundly, knowing that her scientific rigor helped end a threat without needless bloodshed. I'd like to ask her. But Vree's story ends with Fallout 1. She disappears from the records after that. Maybe she stayed with the Brotherhood. Maybe she left. Maybe she couldn't handle knowing what her work had done. The Brotherhood of Steel, they're supposed to be about preserving knowledge, about understanding technology. But they learned something from the Master's fall. They learned that information is power. That knowledge can be a weapon. That sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to someone is show them the truth about themselves. They became more secretive after that, more cautious about what knowledge they shared and with whom. The Master taught them that lesson, taught everyone that lesson, that your greatest weakness might be something you never thought to question, that your entire worldview can collapse if someone finds the right crack and pushes. The super mutants who survived, they never forgot. Some of them still talk about the Master decades later. Marcus refuses to discuss it much, treating it as shameful history. But you can hear the loss in his voice when the subject comes up. The Master was his creator, his leader, his reason for existing. And the Master killed himself because he realized the unity was doomed. What does that do to a person? To have your creator, your God, your purpose, destroy themselves because they realized you were a mistake. The intelligent super mutants carried that knowledge. They were living proof of the Master's failed vision, walking reminders of good intentions gone catastrophically wrong, and they were sterile, always sterile. That fact followed them everywhere. Every human who learned what they were eventually asked the same questions. Can you reproduce? Will there be more of you? And the answer was always no. The super mutants were a dead end, an evolutionary branch that terminated with the first generation. Some of them found peace with it, found other purposes, but others spent decades angry, bitter, searching for solutions that didn't exist. The Master's legacy wasn't just the mutants he created, it was the knowledge he left them with, the understanding that they were doomed, that their race had no future. That's the darkest secret of all, not the sterility itself, not even the Master's suicide, but the fact that all the surviving super mutants have to live with the knowledge that they're the last of their kind, that when they die, there will be no more, that the Master's dream of a mutant future dies with them, slowly, over centuries, one death at a time. The Wasteland is full of tragedies, full of people who tried to do good and failed, full of victims and villains and everyone in between. But the Master's story stands out because it's so completely futile. He didn't fail because someone stopped him. He didn't fail because the Brotherhood was too strong, or the Vault Dweller was too clever. He failed because he never checked his basic assumptions, because he built everything on a biological impossibility. And when he finally understood, when the truth hit him like a hammer, he couldn't live with what he'd done. Richard Gray, the doctor who wanted to save people, looked at his legacy of forced mutations and sterile soldiers, and realized he'd been the Wasteland's disease all along. Not the cure, never the cure. So he ended it, pushed the button, counted down 4 minutes. And in those final moments, as the nuclear device armed itself, as the cathedral's walls began to shake, did he think about Harold, his old friend who'd survived Mariposa? Did he think about the hub, where he'd been a doctor? Did he think about Vault 8, where he'd been exiled for murder all those years ago? Or did he only think about the VATS? About June 23rd, 2102? About the moment that robotic arm knocked him into the FEV and destroyed Richard Moreau's life forever? We'll never know. The Master took his final thoughts to oblivion. All that's left is the story, the warning, the reminder that good intentions aren't enough, that brilliance isn't enough, that you need to question your assumptions, check your facts, understand the full consequences of your actions. Because if you don't, you might spend 60 years building something magnificent and terrible, only to discover it was impossible from the start. You might become a god to thousands, only to realize you're leading them nowhere. You might sacrifice your humanity to save humanity, only to understand that you've destroyed what you were trying to preserve. That's the Master's darkest secret. Not that his mutants were sterile, not that he killed himself when he found out, but that he was right about one thing. Humanity does destroy itself over differences, does tear itself apart, does need something to unite it. He was just wrong about the solution. Unity through forced transformation doesn't work. Unity through elimination of diversity doesn't work. Unity through creating a sterile master race definitely doesn't work. But the problem he identified, the human tendency towards self-destruction, that's still real, still happening. The wasteland is still full of factions fighting over resources, over ideology, over territory, raiders and settlers, brotherhood and enclave, NCR and legion, humans and mutants and ghouls and synths, all struggling for survival, all seeing others as threats. The Master's vision failed, but the need for something better, for some way to bring people together, that didn't die with him. It's still out there, still waiting for someone to find a solution that actually works. A unity that doesn't require destroying what makes us human. A future that's sustainable beyond a single generation. Maybe that's why this story matters. Why? It refuses to stay buried. Because the Master's failure is a warning, a roadmap of what not to do. A reminder that even the most brilliant minds can be catastrophically wrong if they don't question themselves. Richard Gray fell into a vat trying to help people. He crawled out as something else. He spent 60 years building an empire on false premises, and he ended it all in 4 minutes when someone finally showed him the truth. That's the legacy. That's the secret. That's what the wasteland needs to remember. Not the monster in the cathedral, but the doctor who became one, the victim who became a victimizer, the savior who became the threat. And the moment when he finally understood and chose to end it, rather than continue the madness. The Master is dead. The cathedral is rubble. The unity is scattered. But the lesson remains. Check your assumptions. Question your beliefs. Make sure your vision is actually possible before you sacrifice everything for it. Because if you don't, you might end up like Richard Gray. Brilliant and powerful and utterly, tragically wrong. Building something magnificent that was doomed from the start. Creating a legacy of suffering that accomplishes nothing. That's the darkest secret you completely missed in Fallout. The Master wasn't just a villain. He was a warning. And if we're not careful, if we don't learn from his mistakes, someone else will fall into their own vat. Someone else will build their own unity. Someone else will spend decades pursuing a vision that can't possibly work, and the wasteland will pay the price. Again.